I will hand over the word to Mick, who will start the introduction of today.
Hello, and whoa, we have already more than 600 participants now on the call. Kate, your concept is becoming so popular. That's great. Dear participants, I want to welcome all of you, activists from various countries, from all over Germany, people from all strands of life. Thank you for participating. My name is Mick Petersman. I'm an activist of the Economy for the Common Good in Hamburg. I would say a sister at heart of the Doughnut Economy. We organized this event in collaboration with the Future Council of Hamburg. The Future Council is made up of about 100 NGOs, small and big, supporting the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. We joined forces as well with hamburg.global and its Doughnut initiative. hamburg.global is a younger network pushing for social and climate justice on a global scale here in Hamburg. And we got RFS Intercultural Programs on board, an international exchange organization. Dear Kate, we are so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for volunteering and spending your time with us. I actually got to know the Doughnut Economy in 2018, lecturing at a university in Karlsruhe about sustainable development. We were amazed in that seminar about the simplicity of the Doughnut image, summing up these complex informations on the social base of a society and whether it operates within planetary boundaries. We listened to your TED Talks and were touched by your biographical motivation to come up with the Doughnut Economy. You're getting lost with neoliberal economics, as I did in my studies in the 70s. But finally achieving first-class honors in politics, philosophy, and economics. You left university to work with ODI, a British development agency in Zanzibar, later working at UNDP on the Human Development Report, and moving to become senior researcher at Oxfam. Now you are a researcher at Oxford University's Environmental Change Institute and professor at Amsterdam University of Applied Science. You are a member of the Club of Rome, and I may proudly add, a member of the scientific board of the ECG movement. Your book, Doughnut Economics, first published in 2017, has been translated into 18 languages, and last year you started DEAL, the Doughnut Economy Action Lab, because it's not only theory, it needs to become practice.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure and honor to join everybody here. It's the first online meeting of Doughnut Economics and Economy for the Common Good. As Mick said, it's like sister concepts and organizations at heart, and I agree. So I'm really delighted for this opportunity for this conversation. And thank you everybody who is listening and participating in English. You don't want to hear my German, but just really appreciating as an English person the fluency of other people in other languages, and thank you. So I'm going to share my screen because I love pictures, and I want to, oops, that doesn't want to move. There we go. I'm framing this presentation around can Hamburg live within the Doughnut? But I know that there are many people beyond Hamburg here, those in Bremen thinking about Frankfurt, and of course from other places around the world. So I'm just going to use Hamburg as the focal point, but you're welcome to listen from anywhere in the world and think about your city or town or neighborhood. So I'm just going to jump in and invite us to pull back out of this Tuesday evening in March in 2021. I want us to think back the whole 21st century. And it's begun with repeated crises, from the financial meltdown of 2008 to the ongoing climate and ecological breakdown, to the current COVID lockdown that people worldwide have been experiencing. We live in an era of repeated crises, and even though they look different, I think they have a lot in common. So they all tell us how deeply connected we are with each other and with the rest of the living world. They show us that the inequalities and the impacts of crisis fall with sharp differences of race and gender, of wealth and power, and between the global north and the global south. But crucially, I think all three of these crises emerge from the very systems that we've created. They emerge from systems that depend upon endless expansion. So if we create a financial system that expects to expand endlessly, it's probably going to kick off a subprime mortgage market. If we have an industrial and an energy system that expects endlessly to use fossil fuels and Earth's resources, then we will indeed induce climate and ecological breakdown. And if we have a system of human settlements that are endlessly pushing out into wildlife areas, coupled with endless increase in travel between nations, then we create conditions ripe for a global health pandemic. So moving away from endless expansion, and I loved the word cloud that people generated, and the word balance kept popping out to me, because I do think we need to move away from this idea that progress lies in endless expansion, which is of course the 20th century story of endless growth. We need to move towards balance. And that is what I offer with the Doughnut, a compass for human prosperity, one way of thinking of it. Nothing is the only framework, the only way. This is one way. If you find it useful, that's wonderful. So to get familiar with this, imagine humanity's use of Earth's resources radiating out from the middle of that picture. So the hole in the middle is a place where people are falling short on the essentials of life without the resources they need to have decent housing, sufficient energy, good food, clean water, education, decent work, political voice, gender equality. I crowdsource these from the world's governments if they look familiar. They are the social priorities in the Sustainable Development Goals. The power of that is that all governments in the world have already agreed that all people in the world have a claim to meeting these. So leave nobody in the hole, get everybody over that social foundation into the green ring. But at the same time, we cannot overshoot that ecological ceiling, because that is where we put so much pressure on the planet in the way that we use her resources that we begin to push the planet out of balance and we cause climate breakdown. We disintegrate the web of life. We create a hole in the ozone layer. And these are the 9 planetary boundaries recognized just over a decade ago by Earth system scientists. They say these are the 9 life-supporting systems that make this unique living planet in the universe specifically habitable and benevolent to humanity. The Holocene that we've been in for the last 11,000 years is the home sweet home of this era. So put these two together, and the goal of the Doughnut, in the simplest of terms, is to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. If that's the goal, we're not there. All of the red shows you how far from that we are. So the red wedge on food in the middle goes 11% of the way to the center of the circle, because 11% of people don't have enough food to eat every day. You can see there's human deprivation in every one of those dimensions, much of it in the world's lower income countries, but we all know that there's deprivation in the midst of wealth in high income countries too. While there is that enduring deprivation for much of humanity, we have collectively already overshot multiple planetary boundaries. On climate change, that ecological ceiling is set at 350 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We know we're over 415. But on each one of these, on biodiversity loss, on excessive fertilizer use, land use change, we are in overshoot. So this is the state of humanity and our planetary home. For we, the people of the early 21st century, it's us. This is happening on our watch. This is our generation that is the first to see this picture. And we have to remember that those who came before us didn't see this. They didn't understand about planetary boundaries in this same way. So we would be crazy to think that last century's economic theories, governmental policies, and business models would in any way solve this problem. There's no way they will. They weren't designed to do this. We have to design economic theory and business models and policies ourselves, specifically for this challenge that we see. And I sincerely believe this is the challenge on which our children and grandchildren will judge us and ask, what did we do once that we knew? This is the global picture. Of course, I'm showing the whole world, all of humanity and the whole planet, but much policy making happens at a lower level. So let's bring it down a level. Researchers at Leeds University created 150 national Doughuts, and here are just 3. Malawi, you can see, falling short very significantly on meeting people's needs without overshooting any of those planetary boundaries, generating around $1,000 per person per year in their national economy. China, around $17,000, both significantly falling short and already in significant overshoot on planetary boundaries. And then Germany on over $50,000 per person per year. One of the few countries that has a fully blue circle in the middle. Now, you know very well that there is deprivation and really significant inequalities in Germany, but this is measured on a very low global bar. So actually all high income countries should have a completely blue circle, but the majority don't. So the blue circle, yes, and this is why Germany will be a country that does well in the Human Development Index, for example, but look at that ecological overshoot. Like all high income countries, way overshooting planetary boundaries. Let's put this in a bigger context. We've got 100 countries here now, and the sweet spot is that top left-hand corner where we meet the needs of all people within the needs of the planet, and we immediately see that no country is there. So I think no country can say we are a developed nation, and I invite everybody to take from their language the idea of developing countries and developed countries. There are not any developed countries, even advanced countries. I can't see any advanced countries here. They would be advanced if they were in the top left-hand corner. So there's the three countries I just showed, Malawi, China, and Germany. Think of the low-income countries. They need to meet the needs of all people for the first time without overshooting planetary boundaries in the way that every country before them has done it. How will they do that? That's an unprecedented journey. The middle-income countries need to meet people's needs for the first time too, while already coming back within those planetary boundaries. That's never been done before. How will they do that? And then the high-income countries, in which the majority of people in this conversation are sitting closer than others to meeting all people's needs, but still far from it, are massively overshooting planetary boundaries. How will we come back within those boundaries? Every nation here is on an unprecedented developmental journey. So I think this calls for a huge amount of humility, coupled with unprecedented ambition to getting there. And we have to remember that these countries are not all standing alone and separate. Their histories are deeply intertwined through histories of colonialism and military power, through policies of structural adjustment imposed in the 1980s and 90s by the World Bank and IMF, through ongoing finance and trade rules that massively favor the global north over the global south, through resource extraction and land grabs, and then the impacts of climate change presently and in the future. These relations all tend to favor the global north over the global south. And we have to recognize that as every country needs to transform, so we need to transform the relationships between these countries too, if we are all to get into the donut. So that's at the level of national policy, but for tonight, we're going to bring it down a level again. What would it mean for a city to take this on? Because I'm finding that cities actually are leaning in and moving faster on this than national governments. So I'm going to focus here to bring our imaginations to Hamburg. And this is the question that we invite all ambitious 21st century cities to ask themselves. So wherever you are, indeed in a city or a town or a neighborhood, you can ask this question for your place. How can Hamburg become a home to thriving people in a thriving place, while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? And as you can hear, that's a complex question. So inside it, first we pull out, what would it mean for the people of Hamburg to thrive? Who are the people of Hamburg in all of their diversity, their different historical stories of what it is that brings them to being living and resident in Hamburg, the cultural richness of their stories, their values? Only the people of Hamburg can say what it means to thrive, respecting the differences of opinion that there'll be between them. So that's a local social question to be answered in Hamburg. And of course, that answer is going to look different whether we're in Stockholm or Dar es Salaam or Mumbai or Abu Dhabi. Let's add to it, what would it mean for Hamburg to thrive within its natural habitat? I mean, where on planet Earth is Hamburg? Which part of Earth's biomes and ecosystems is your city located in, nestled inside? And this question comes from the brilliant biomimicry thinker, Janine Benyus. So if Janine were with us, she would say, people of Hamburg, take me to the wild land next door. Where is the best place we could go to, which is the intact, healthy ecosystem of this place? Is there a forest? Is there a wetland we could go to? And we would go there and she said, okay, let's ask ourselves, what's nature doing here? What's nature's generosity in this place? How much carbon dioxide does nature sequester in these trees? How much groundwater does she store underground after a storm? How much biodiversity does she house? How much does she clean the air and cool the air on a summer's day? And these metrics become the ecological performance standards for the city. So the ambition for Hamburg would be to say, how can Hamburg aim to match or exceed nature's generosity? Can we sequester as much carbon dioxide in our city as the wildland does and store the groundwater after a storm? Can we house biodiversity and cool the air? So these two I've shown are what we call the local aspirations, thriving people in an ecologically thriving place. And this is often the main focus of a city. But we have to recognize that all cities, and especially those of the global north, are situated and deeply connected to the rest of the world, ecologically and socially. So think of all of the clothing and food and electronics and consumer goods and furnishing and construction material that is imported every day into your city, and the stream of waste that goes out as a result of people's purchases and use, and ask, how can Hamburg respect the health of the whole planet? So what is Hamburg's impact on the planet? We saw that Germany's national donut was in a big overshoot. We can bet that Hamburg's donut is also going to be in overshoot too. Come back within that carbon footprint, the material footprint, fertilizer use, water use, land use change. I'm not talking about fertilizer and land use in Hamburg. I'm talking about the resources used worldwide to produce everything that Hamburg consumes. So pull back within and respect the health of the whole planet. But then also now think still of those supply chains of food and electronics and construction material. Think of the people working in those supply chains and ask yourselves, how can Hamburg respect the well-being of people worldwide who are stitching and sewing those clothes, picking and packing the food, and digging and transporting the materials and assembling our phones and computers? Through those global supply chains, how can we respect people worldwide? So here we have local aspiration, thriving people in a thriving place, set in the context of global responsibility, the health of the whole planet, the well-being of all people. That is what we think a 21st century city has to take on in all of its complexity. But the complexity doesn't go away if we ignore it. Let's embrace it. So here are some examples of City Donut workshops that we held before any of us had heard of COVID in the autumn of 2019 in Philadelphia, in Portland, and Amsterdam. And what you're seeing here is city policymakers and community members gathered around their city's portrait across those four lenses that I just described. And they're looking at the synergies and the tensions and the interconnections and trying to come up with ideas for how would we reinvent the way we govern our cities if we take this holistic perspective across it. And the people left these workshops saying, I just don't want to work in this siloed way anymore. I work on sewage, you work on education, she works on transport, he works on racial integration. We all need to connect and come together because everything is connected. So what would come out of this? If we could actually take this work forward, what directions for framing a new economy? Where would we start? Well, anyone who studied economics at university or school knows that most economics starts like this: supply and demand, and that's not going to get us where we want to go to. So I believe we need to start with this diagram. I call it the embedded economy diagram. It brings together ecological economics, feminist economics, and commons theory. What have we got? We've got an economy that's based in society because it is a social construct embedded in the living world. Now that should seem obvious to us. The economy is part of society, part of the living world, but mainstream economics doesn't normally start here. So let's start here. We're drawing in material and we're putting out waste and pollution, and we're bathed in that river of solar energy, which brings all life to the planet. But let's dive in further and recognize that the economy, yes, okay, there's the market, supply and demand, but in that space, who we are seen to be is either consumer or producer. Are you shopping or working, or shopping or working? And in the producer role, are you labor getting a wage, or are you capital drawing a return and a dividend? That's the market space. But there's also, of course, the state, where we may be public servant, a resident, a voter, or protester, all crucial roles that we play in relation to the state. But don't forget, that's just the GDP showing up in the market and the state. What about the unpaid economy, where we wake up every day, the space we start our lives each morning as parent, partner, relative, or child? The unpaid caring work of cooking, washing, cleaning, sweeping, raising the children, do it all again tomorrow. The reproductive household work, typically traditionally done by women, to be redistributed between both all parents and carers. And the commons, where we are volunteers and sharers and co-creators and stewards, not through the market or the state, but as a community. Now, one thing that COVID has revealed and helped make really clear is that when the market space is literally shut down due to the need for physical distancing, then the state steps in and does things we never believed or never were told it could do, and steps in and provides and underpins the wages of the nation's workers and steps up state level services. But also the household steps in and takes on huge burdens of care, some of it with joy and some of it with deep stress. Caring for the sick, homeschooling children, also caring for the neighbors and community, and that community outreach through the commons, a food bank, a soup kitchen, a community WhatsApp group helping pick up medicines for neighbors who can't get there. Most people say one thing we don't want to lose when we say goodbye to the COVID pandemic is that sense of we, that reconnection of community. So how can we hold that, and how can we build cities and places that recognize that each one of us plays all of these different roles in our societies? We weave in and out of them. We also need to transform the dynamics of our cities. So we've inherited cities and nations that are degenerative by design. We take, make, use, and lose Earth's resources. That pushes us over planetary boundaries. And we need to create places that are regenerative by design so that resources are not used up, they're used again and again and again. What could that look like? Here's just some examples. So the city of Oslo has got rid of cars from the city center. So you can take the tram, you can walk, you can bike. Of course, it cleans the air, it reduces the fossil fuels associated with mobility and transport, and it's still affordable. The city of Paris famously during lockdown repainted the yellow lines on the street, and major avenues like Rue de Rivoli were handed over to cyclists. And the evidence shows that more women are biking, new cyclists are getting on their bikes. So it's changing who is showing up and who is participating in this form of mobility. In the city of Amsterdam, the government has introduced regulations around circular construction. And this is a district where they are a circular living lab, where all the building that's going on here is circular building. So materials must be usable again and again and again. And in the city of Medellin in Colombia, the river used to be treated as some kind of industrial sewer, just take all that waste away. But then by reconnecting with the ecosystem of the place, they said, no, this is the life of the city. And they've opened up river parks around that river, bringing community to the river rather than treating it as a waste dump. So those are just some examples of cities that are moving towards regenerative by design. But we also need to create cities that are no longer divisive, driving opportunity and value into a few hands, but are instead distributive, sharing value and opportunity far more equitably with everybody in society who co-creates it. And I noticed at the beginning of this session that the logos of several organizations as part of this webinar have logos that resemble that distributed network, because of course it resonates with us so much. So what can distributive design look like in practice? Well, I'm going to go to the city of Preston in the UK, which was promised a big shopping mall, big names were going to come and invest here, and then they didn't turn up. And the people of Preston realized no one's coming to save us. We need to reinvigorate our own economy from within. And so they began what's now known as the Preston Model. The city council, together with schools and hospitals and the museums and the anchor institutions, using community wealth building to purchase locally, to make smaller contracts so that local providers could fulfill them, to buy from organizations that were socially committed, environmentally committed, and to weave together a local economy. The city of Vienna, I'm sure many people know, is an unusual city in that more than 60% of people there live in housing that is socially owned and run. It's owned by the city itself or by cooperatives related to the city. And that means that high quality city center housing is affordable, and many people live this way. And it's much more distributive design of access to housing in that city compared to others, another Vancouver in Canada, where it's almost inaffordable to live there because housing is seen as an investment item rather than a human right. The city of Seattle in the US was one of the first to introduce a living wage. And when they said we're going to pay $15 an hour, people said it won't work. Nobody will be able to afford to go to restaurants anymore. But it turned out that even the wait staff in restaurants could now afford to go to restaurants. And in Bogota, saying, why do we give away valuable public space to people to dump their cars? Why don't we turn it into a park for people, not a park for cars, where people can meet, connect, meet with people like themselves, people not like themselves and begin to build that fabric of community, that we that everybody so longs for. So these are just some examples of distributive by design. But I think what really matters is the design of organizations. And since I'm talking about cities, I'm going to talk about the design of city councils and city administrations, because the conversations I've had with mayors and city civil servants over the past few years, many say, oh yeah, we inherited institutions that were really focused on serving growth. And we, in previous decades, would always focus on this question, how can we make our city grow? And what is the city GDP? And is it going up fast enough? And actually now we are pivoting to a different direction and asking, how can we make our city thrive? And what is it that allows some cities to ask this question about thriving while others are left still holding that growth question? And I believe there are 5 design traits that really make a difference here. And I'm going to speak through briefly to each of them because I think they can really inform the work, and they connect so well with the work that ECG, Economy for the Common Good, already does. And I know there's a lot of overlap. This is where we'll see that sister organization. So purpose, what is your purpose as a city? Amsterdam was a city that had a circular strategy, it had a low carbon strategy, a sustainability strategy, a commitment to participation. When they saw the donut, they said, this brings it together for us. This acts as an umbrella concept over the top, and they redrew it in orange, the color of their city. But they also said, our purpose as a city is to be a thriving, inclusive, regenerative city for all residents while respecting planetary boundaries. When you hear that kind of articulation of a purpose, you know that a city is moving towards thriving within planetary boundaries. It's that sense of boundedness that to me is the signal that we're moving to a new paradigm, away from endless growth to thriving within. But having a purpose is not enough, of course. So it needs to be backed up by the networks that city builds, the city council's relationship with all the different kinds of stakeholders in the city. Some examples, doing a circular city scan. So the city of Glasgow in the UK did a scan of all of its different industries. So this is a picture of a scan of its food industries, the bakeries, the beer and brewing, fisheries. How can we see what industries we have here? And how could the waste from one process become the food for the next? So taking a scan of the different players so we can actually begin to connect them. In Cleveland, Ohio, the University Hospital, an anchor institution in the city, realized that they were on the edge of a really low-income neighborhood, and almost nobody from the neighborhood worked in the hospital, even though it was right there. So they created a recruitment scheme saying, we're going to bring into and make it possible for people with a lower educational background who actually, with a little bit of training, can do this job for sure. Mothers returning from maternity leave, people with a single conviction who need to be given a second chance. So they opened up employment opportunity with very intentional recruitment from that neighborhood. And then in Melbourne, the city wanted to be running its city services on renewable energy, but knew that they couldn't do that as just one institution. So they got together about 13 organizations across the city, and together, by offering a 10-year fixed price for renewable energy, it caused the building of a renewable wind power farm to bring forward that future much quicker than otherwise would have happened. So using the power of networks to bring the future into the present. Governance, a massive topic. I will just talk on 3 ideas. One, setting ambitious regulations. So the city of Amsterdam has said, okay, by 2050, we want to be 100% circular economy. Nobody even knows what that means yet, but let's aim to get there, like Kennedy aimed to get to the moon without knowing how. But 2050 is far too far away. So 2030, within a decade, we aim to have 50% material circularity in this city. Now that's serious stuff, but let's not just settle for a decade away. In 2022, 10% of all the materials in city procured contracts must be circular materials. To me, this is a really good set. Big vision, decadal ambition, next year action. Any business that wants to be in business in the city of Amsterdam knows that if they want to belong and stay, they need to get circular now. And you should get going now, otherwise you'll be a laggard. So matching that ambition of regulation with monitoring with new metrics. And the city of Amsterdam, starting with the donut up top, are moving down sector by sector, from food, from clothing, from construction, and then asking themselves, what kind of metrics will enable us to monitor that we're putting in place a circular economy? This isn't easy. This is new, and it takes different metrics to monitor it. Talking of metrics, of course, this is a really clear connection with ECG. Cities like Stuttgart, and I know in districts of Barcelona, saying, okay, we are going to reward businesses that complete the Economy for the Common Good scorecard and get a good score, and we're going to give them preferential treatment in our city. So we're going to use the new metrics that are coming from initiatives like this and elevate business that's doing it well. And of course, some cities are also themselves doing the balance card and the balance sheet and seeing their own score, so using it as a new form of metric for their own governance. Moving on to ownership, how do we support as cities the distributed ownership of the sources of wealth creation? I'm talking about land and housing, like in Vienna. Who owns the land and the houses of the city? And how can that be made more equitable? Can we have community-owned, cooperatively owned housing that creates affordable social housing? Who owns the utilities? Does the city make it possible for community-owned renewable energy to thrive here? Who owns the data? Barcelona has committed to open data. What are other cities doing to check the ownership of this incredibly valuable 21st century asset? And who owns the enterprise? Are these multinational companies filling the high street? Or are these locally or regionally or nationally owned or employee or cooperatively owned enterprises? Again, the Economy for the Common Good work is recognizing and elevating those within the cities that have embraced it. Moving from ownership, let's move down to the bottom of the signboard, which of course matters hugely: finance. The story of finance in the city, and whether finance is in service of the city or the city is turning out to be in service of finance. So where city revenue comes from. I was on a call with the City of York this morning, who told me that they earn around £6 or £7 million a year from car parking charges in the city. If you want to get rid of the cars in your city, how are you going to replace that revenue with something that's compatible with regenerative economy? City budgeting, how are you going to live out these values in the city budgeting process? City banking, the financial crisis showed that many big banks are just not that interested in providing affordable finance to small and medium enterprises. So cities like Vancouver are stepping in with Van City, but city banks and co-ops and credit unions are popping up everywhere, enabling the finance to support those local enterprises. And then city investment and divestment. What is the city doing with its own pension fund? Is it invested in fossil fuels, or is it actually invested in the future that the city wants to bring about? So let me pull back and ask, how does the city of Hamburg or Frankfurt or Bremen or wherever anybody on this call is, how could your city ensure that it's designed to pivot all 5 of these design traits towards thriving and not get pulled back into the extractive mindset of endless growth? It's not just the city council, of course, it's the anchor institutions, it's the business networks, it's the universities, NGOs, think tanks, and it's the community-based organizations. And I'm going to finish up just talking about those, because I think it connects with a lot of people's interest on this call. So community-based organizations are doing amazing work around Doughnut Economics. I should say that in terms of Doughnut Economics, we have never once asked anybody to use the concept, talk about it, share it, engage with it, pick it up. Everything that's happened has been change makers spontaneously saying, this is useful to us, so we're going to start something. And a lot of it has taken us completely by surprise. So in Amsterdam, a group of change makers across the city said, oh, we're all using this concept in our work, so we're going to form the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition. This just popped up. Now, once they had formed and created a website and started writing about it on Deal's platform, of course, it inspired lots of people in other places, in Malaysia, Australia, California, in Ireland, in London, in Berlin, in Cambridge, in Barbados. And then organizers from each of these groups have now got together and started organizing together. So if anyone on this call, and I'm sure people from Hamburg are in there, anyone in this call is interested, there is a community of local organizers who have decided for themselves, this seems useful to us, waiting to connect with you. I do want to say at this point, it's really important from Doughnut Economics Action Lab's point of view that we do not ask that anybody who wants to use the ideas set up a local coalition. We are trying to create tools that can also be used by others. It could be used by, in combination with Economy for the Common Good or Transition Network or other organizations. So if you want to set up a coalition, go for it. But if you just want to bring these tools in and combine them with your existing work, go for it. In Devon, they've started designing their own local donut. They want to hold a People's Donut Assembly next year. They're plotting their path. In Melbourne, in Australia, they've started brainstorming. These are all of that local social lens. What would it mean to be thriving people, to be empowered and enabled and connected and healthy for the people of Melbourne? This is the beginning of their journey. All of this takes us by surprise. We never planned it. We never expected it. We're learning so much that's coming back from these community groups, and I know it massively inspires others. So let me finish here with a beautiful donut that's a reinterpretation from the Maori culture in New Zealand, one going on in Brussels and in Barbados. I've focused a lot on cities of the global north, but I'm just pointing out here it's being interpreted and reinterpreted in many different communities and places. So we set up Doughnut Economics Action Lab because people had picked up the donut and started playing with it, making glasses, games, teaching, using it in their boardroom. And we set up our platform to invite these people to connect and learn from each other and share with each other. And we're just delighted to see what happens and how that's happening, sharing backstories, because these are the inspiration. We all know, and I'm sure Economy for the Common Good sees it too. It's when one place starts doing it that people in another place say, hey, look what they're doing over there. We could do that too here. So the power of peer-to-peer inspiration. So I'll stop there and say, I'm just really delighted again to be connecting. How can our ideas connect? What is a useful intersection of them? Let's see change makers put them to use. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kate. And I'm sure that there are tons of people who really just want to get going and follow you in your footsteps. And I've seen questions poured in from the first minute. I would like to start with the first question that was one of the first to be asked, and it has been rated highest forever. And the question is, I'm interested to know if the Doughnut economy was ever presented at the World Economic Forum in Davos and how these leaders have reacted to it.
Yes, it has been. It was presented by me. I was invited to Davos in January 2018. And it's one of those things you think, shall I go? Am I going to go? Do I believe in this? Do I want to be part of this? And I thought, yeah, okay, I will go and I will see. So I went to Davos and I was invited to present it in this session. So basically the way Davos works is there are big public sessions, and I was presenting it you come down the stairs and there's this massive digital board, and I was talking about Doughnut Economics with the head of WWF. But and it feels like, oh yeah, we're in the center of the space and we're talking about it, but it's entirely optional and voluntary. You can like, oh, that looks interesting, and you just walk past, and then behind closed doors, and then behind more closed doors, and behind some other closed doors, that is where the power conversations are really happening. So I don't regret going, and I presented it to it, but it's not like it's confronting it's not like anybody is required to answer there on the spot. But what I think the question is really getting at is has it been presented at centers of power? So let me again go back and say, I have never once asked anybody to engage with the donut. And therefore I was a mother of very small children when I first published this book. I had 5-year-old twins. So I had no time to knock on shut doors. My principle was, I'm just going to go where the energy is. I'll go where the invitation comes. And also, I don't want to be banging on the door of power and be told, thank you, no, that's not very interesting. So I'm just going to go where people say, yes, yes, we want to do this. Great, let's work. What's really interesting is then over time, power starts coming back, and power starts knocking on your door. So I've been invited to present it at the World Bank multiple times. Actually, I've just recently been invited to present it at the World Trade Organization. And even though when I wrote Doughnut Economics, I very intentionally put aside governments. I thought, I'm not going to try and make this sensible for governments, because if I do that, I will write a really sensible book. It will be practical and incremental and doable and feasible. Why? There is a million think tank reports about that out already. So I ignored governments. And what's really interesting to me is that governments are coming. And it starts with city governments. But I know that national governments, and I've talked with some ministers in Canada, in Costa Rica. I know people like Jacinda Ardern, who's like, leading towards moving towards a well-being economy in New Zealand, has said, yeah, I've read Doughnut Economics. It confirms the way I already think. So yes, it's people in these positions of power who choose to start picking it up. And again, that's for me where the energy goes. If the person asking this question really, what's the problem here? It's the endless growth, isn't it? That's where it comes down to. And I love to challenge that. And I never travel without hosepipe. Always, say, look, this is the shape of progress in the 20th century, isn't it? It's the exponential growth curve that sits behind every single macroeconomic conversation. Now, Nothing in nature does this forever. Growth is a wonderful, healthy phase of life, but actually, this is nature's growth curve. Everything that succeeds and survives and thrives eventually grows up. So that's the question that I like putting to them. And people find it very uncomfortable. And of course, don't concede on the spot, but I hope more and more people in those positions of power go away and start reflecting, and more of their grandchildren are tugging on their sleeve and saying, hey, what are you doing at work? So it's moving towards positions of power. It's really important that we don't get co-opted, as I'm sure economy is common good, right? You don't want to get co-opted. When power meets a radical or a transformative idea, something's going to get transformed, and it's our job to ensure it's not us. So I really enjoy engaging in these conversations, but challenging power to think about the idea of endless growth as a 21st century goal.
Mm-hmm. So moving from individual entities that have high power, the next question that was most interesting for many was the next concrete actions. So what are next logical steps that each of us can take tomorrow or even today to push us more towards or into the donut? So that is more a question on the individual level.
So go back to that embedded economy diagram I showed. Each of us play many, many, many roles. We are shopping and we are working. We are in the home, we are in the community. We have a relationship to the state. So you could choose to start in the market or the state or the household, the commons relationship. Say, okay, in each of these spaces, in the market state relation, what do I buy? Where do I buy my electricity from? Which company do I give the privilege of holding my savings in a bank account? Why don't I switch from a bank that doesn't give a damn to a bank that actually is set up to invest in social and environmental value? And I heard from Christian Felber that indeed there's a bank that now has an economy for the common good bank account. Fantastic. Triodos Bank, similar, moving in that kind of direction. Shift your energy supply from a fossil fuel energy to renewable energy. Change your diet, change the way you travel. So there's so much we can all do. In the community, volunteer. Think about how you vote. Think about how you influence elections. Divest your savings and invest them somewhere else. But also I want to say that each of us is really influential, right? A schoolgirl can talk to other schoolgirls in a way that no adult can come close to. And a teacher can talk to other teachers in the way that nobody else can come to. And a CEO can influence other CEOs. So each one of us, whether we're a parent at the school gates or the newest graduate recruit in a company or a town councillor or the CEO, we can all use those roles to influence others. There's so much each one of us can do.
Yes, and we've seen an example of a schoolgirl talking to others.
There we go.
All the levels. So
there
that is a very nice example, of course. Yes. So the next question is actually aiming at the Gemeinwohlbilanzierung, so the common good balancing. Do you think that this approach, the common good balancing, is a useful tool to get inside the donut?
The common good balance sheet.
Yes.
Yeah, so I know there's one for municipalities and there's one for businesses. So yes, so to me the donut, here's the donut is like one, it's a compass, the goal of where we want to get to. It's one way of expressing it. Meet the needs of all within the means of the planet. To me, then the next step is to say we need to create the dynamics that bring us there. We need to create dynamics that shift from being degenerative to regenerative. We need to create dynamics that shift from being divisive to distributive. Now, if we've gone that far together, yes, there's the goal and here's the new dynamics. How do we actually bring this about? I think there are many different ways and there are different tools and different frameworks. And to me, economy for the common good is one very clear framework that you could say, yes, this is one way that we could actually bring this about. I don't think anything is the only way. Different countries and contexts and cultures will respond differently, but it's one very powerful way that we actually can say, and it's really powerful because it's shown in some cities and districts and regions that the city council and the municipality is recognizing individual companies. So you're beginning to get that infrastructure, putting it into place. So yes, I can see a lot of resonance there.
Looking at all the questions and what else is of interest, a few people have asked for very concrete examples. So please share an example where a concrete community project's decision was different through the use of the donut approach. Can you maybe select one that is targeting either mobility decisions or infrastructure decisions?
So in Cornwall, in the county of Cornwall in the UK, they have taken the donut concept and turned it into what they call the Cornwall decision wheel. And they are now have a rule that all public decisions go through the donut lens and checking, is this improving things for the community? Is it bringing us back within the living planet? Now, I can't tell you that the decision was different because I don't know what decision they would have made if they hadn't been using it, but they've chosen to adopt it because they are clearly finding it informs their decisions. In Amsterdam, some of the community organizations, when they first encountered the donut, said, right, we're going to create something called donut deals, not the same as our name, but a deal as in, we're going to start recognizing community-based projects that bring people, that start helping support people on at least 2 of the social foundations and bring people back somehow within planetary boundaries. For example, there was one project where they began supporting women sewing curtains for their neighborhoods, so earning an income for their homes, providing curtains for their homes, but because they were insulating their homes, they were reducing their energy use, and so reducing energy use and climate change. So they began to say, we're going to call these donut deals. So that's at the community level where they've begun. But to be honest, I think this kind of work is only just beginning. And it's a very top level frame that helps people say, I want to connect all of these things together. So I still want to learn more from community organizations that say, yeah, this is how it's changed. Again, in Amsterdam, there's a new organization being set up called Sunwala, which means sun water. They're setting up a series of micro parks throughout the city. Parents who say, I want my kids to grow up near wildlife everywhere in this city. And they are using the principles of the donut and that signboard to design the setup of their organization so that it's designed in service of its purpose.
I've also received a number of questions about another player in the field, and this is about big corporations. So are there any plans so far to get big companies or corporations into acting according to your vision?
Let me just check, are you talking about B Corps or big corporations?
Big corporations.
Big ones. Okay. No.
The large ones.
It's important to know.
Yes.
Okay. So in designing Doughnut Economics Action Lab, we're constantly balancing the principle of openness, saying, hey, these are the tools, we've created the city portrait, anybody can pick it up and use it, inviting people to form local coalitions as is happening. That's just openness, and we're trusting and allowing others to pick up our ideas and work with them and adapt them and innovate with them and surprise us. But we're always balancing that with integrity. And in fact, in the chat box just before we started talking, I shared a link to our donut principles of practice. So the one thing we ask anybody who says, oh, we want to use the donut, we say, please follow our donut principles of practice. And in the space of openness, integrity, the one community group, as it were, the interest group that we are most careful with and where we lean to integrity is with business. And the reason is because business can either, it's so caught in its own mindset that it can either unintentionally divert the framework or actually very actively co-opt it. So right now we say, dear business, you're interested in the donut? That's very good to hear. You're welcome to use the donut. We've created a workshop. It's called When Business Meets the Donut. You are welcome. But this is an internal reflection tool. You do this internally. This is quiet work you need to do inside. There's a lot of reflection you probably need to do in your company, by the way. Please do not publicize it. Put it on your website. Put it on Twitter. Put it on your branding. Don't talk about it publicly. This is internal work that you need to do as a company. For now, we are recruiting a member to our team to help us and support on business and enterprise. And when we've done that, we'll be ready to take the next steps of saying, okay, how do we want to collaborate with other actors in the new economy space around business? How do we want to engage with the big business or not? If we think they're actually not able to transform, why would we spend our time with them? Why wouldn't we spend our time with actually the more socially oriented enterprises that have been designed to bring us into the donut? So these are all questions we are looking forward to investigating further. At the moment, we're holding integrity because the worst thing we think could happen is if business did co-opt the donut, and it would lose its credibility and it would lose its value for so many other people. So we are holding the line on that until we're ready to open it up and explore more.
Well, thank you very much. I have a final question. So in the beginning, we asked how many people are not active yet in anything related to social economic activities, and 29% I'm not active yet. So what final piece of encouragement can you give those who are not active yet?
Well, they're here on this call.
Yes, first step.
So that's not everybody in the world is here on this call. So that's, fantastic that you're interested. I think you are active, actually, otherwise you wouldn't be here at all. And I think get active if you want to. It's not my role, and I never try and push people, because I think there are so many people. It's until you find, that's the way for me. I want to be involved in a community network. I want to be involved in, I'm going to sit down this weekend, I'm going to move my household electricity supply, and I'm going to change banks. Do that on your birthday as a celebration for yourself. Why not, So each of us finds the way of getting active and involved. Some people, and I think it sometimes depends on personality. Some people are quite extrovert and they want to be involved in a group and they want to have meetups, and other people don't. And that's fine. Do it quietly in your own home and in your own way. Some people think, have a certain set of skills, or want to bring those skills in another place. Some people love going on protest, and we need protest. Some people work very quietly behind the scenes inside a bank or inside a law firm or inside journalism, quietly making sure those changes happen. And then some people organize and celebrate the new economy and point to it. And I think that's what Economy for the Common Good does. That's what Doughnut Economics Action Lab does. We need to recognize there are so many ways of engaging. So for those 29% of people who say they're not already involved, I think you are, because you're here. And it's wonderful that you're here, and we're all here, and we're all bringing about this new economy together.
Thank you so much, Kate. I will go to the other computer and get active right now. I would like to hand the microphone to Mick for the next part, and then I'll explain the second part again.
Oh, thank you so much, Kate. I understood better. The Doughnut economy is an overarching concept for social ecological transformation. And the paths to go need to be designed locally, regionally, nationally, and they will vary. They will vary from city to city, from country to country. And you had so many examples, from Amsterdam to Oslo to Copenhagen and the like. And we can see there is something going already, but it needs to be pushed by grassroots. And so you kind of challenged us, with your example, how to thrive in Hamburg and how to walk or how to move towards the Doughnut economy here in Hamburg. I was surprised to see last week, and Annette, can you please bring that in this slide? I was surprised to see last week that the German government updated its sustainability strategy. And there is something wrong with the slide. We can't read it all, so I will read it out. The German cabinet decided to update its strategy, and the announcement starts a future in which the natural environment and the climate are protected, in which fewer people are in need, and in which society pulls together. And as I read that, I thought, okay, this sounds so similar to the Doughnut economy. And we know in Germany that we are so far away from that there's a huge implementation gap, and that we can't rely on governments. But I thought, we have elections in September here. And just yesterday, on Sunday, we had the elections in some country states. And there was again some hope for a real change, because we can't believe that our government will really push for what they say with their objectives. They also needed to admit that only 4 of the 12 sustainable development goals which they were pursuing they are meeting. Yeah, 8 they are not meeting. Yeah, and we know, when it comes to traffic, for example, mobility, it's still the diesel and the like. Yeah, so we need to push from the grassroots, and this is also why we wanted to use your speech as a kickstart to discuss within our local communities, and this is going to happen when we break out into the breakout groups. But I first want to say thank you so much for your thoughts, for your concept, for developing this concept, and also for your wisdom, not to bang at the doors, but wait, until they come. Because then the power is changing, is moving to the right end. Yeah. So I want to thank you. When we would stay on meet on a stage, I would hand over now a token of appreciation. I will send it through the post office tomorrow. Thank you so much, and goodbye to you. Have a good evening, and we will go to our breakouts right after Annette told us how to do that.
Thank you so much, Mick. It's been a huge pleasure to join you. You couldn't have put it better than I said it. It's an overarching concept, and how it will happen will vary place to place. It's perfect. And you thank me for the concept. I thank you and everybody on this call and people worldwide for putting it into practice, because otherwise it would just be an idea on a page, but people are making it practice. So I hope you have excellent discussions in the breakout groups. Thanks so much for having me this evening.